Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and today we have a very important show. I mean, they're all important, but this is really an immediate concern. Most of my programs are about spiritual awakening and conscious evolution, but this is about the effect of our body's interaction with our environment. And I have two specialists in the field, as well as spiritual teachers, but they're also environmentalists. I'm here today with Dr. J.J. Hurtak and Dr. Desiree Hurtak, an environmentalist herself. And they just returned from Japan. And there's a lot more going on in Japan than the media is telling us. So, yes, everybody knows there was a tsunami, there was an earthquake, there was the nuclear meltdown. What is happening with the nuclear power plant? And, well, there's a media blackout, but what's happening with the nuclear power plant, Fukushima, and with the radiation that's going into the atmosphere from that plant?
We wish to think of this as a theme of Japan as barometer of change for the world. And in a sense of solidarity with the scientists of Japan who are working on this tragedy, not simply a one meltdown, but three meltdowns. Plant 1, 2, and 3.
But what is a meltdown? I don't think people even know what that means.
It's when basically the supportive and security systems dissolve so that the pellets
and the rods,
the main components of a nuclear plant, fall to the earth, in figure of speech, go into the substructure or the basement complex, giving the idea to the common average person that everything is going to melt through the earth till it hits China. So the
China syndrome.
Syndrome is what we see threefold, not onefold, but threefold in Japan.
So just like to kind of refresh people's minds about nuclear power in general, what is a nuclear power plant? Someone said it's just a fancy way to boil water.
I agree with that in a certain sense. All they're doing is trying to turn a turbine with kind of hot steam. But what they're doing to get that steam, of course, is they're doing this fission. Now, the sun is fusion. That's a different thing. We're still working on fusion technology, which will be safer. But they're doing a fission, which is really splitting the atoms so that they hit one another and create these usually uranium particles that then can energize each other and cause this chain reaction to occur.
To have more energy to boil the water.
Exactly. That's about it.
So, but there's a byproduct, there's a radioactive waste product that comes from that, right?
Yeah, and actually what's happened, and I think this is really where people need to know, is that at the time of the meltdown, there were actually the first three reactors melted down. There's a fourth one there, too, that did a partial meltdown. And then if you go a little space away, there's 5 and 6 that survived. So there's actually 6 reactors at the site. But what they spewed out, which is what's important to us, is they had iodine-131, which actually, everyone's like thinking about iodine and taking the iodine pills and all that stuff. But as it turns out, iodine has a half-life. That means how long is it really bad for? Most of it's gone away in only 8 days.
Oh, really?
So you know, maybe in
Is that what most of what was spewed out of the reactor was iodine?
No, actually. But it's very dangerous when iodine spews out. And that's why, and it affects, especially for young children, the thyroid gland. And that's why people are told. Even my girlfriend in Switzerland moved close to a nuclear reactor, and the city actually gave her iodine pills just in case of an emergency.
Really? Wow.
So it's because of the immediate thing. But once that's taken care of, then what are you left with, right? After the 8 days or 16 days for the whole thing to disappear, then you're left with cesium-134 and 137.
Which is not good for you.
Right.
Either.
It has a half-life of 2 years for 134 and 30 years, and this is a half-life for 137. So that means that this stuff that's spewed out, which is a lot of it is the cesium, is left in the soil for at least 30, and if you double it to mean completely gone, probably something like 60 years. This is the thing that most people don't think that nuclear power plants are that dangerous because, you know, how many people died right now in Fukushima? I mean, you know, maybe there's 1 or 2, and of course,
it's not the effects right away.
Exactly. That's very, very important.
Effects over a long period of time.
But there was the result of this one rabbit, so we can see some effects.
Oh, yeah,
we can show
That's
the rabbit.
Awful.
This was a rabbit born close to the Fukushima reactor, and he has no ears.
Oh, my God.
And that was just the most recent event.
What's happening to children being born
Well,
there?
actually, the Fukushima prefecture asked for a French company to come over and test the children, and every child they tested had cesium in their urine, which is where they tested.
But how is that affecting them genetically, emotionally, intellectually?
Well, you know, we don't really know, but if you leave cesium in the system, which it probably would be, then, you know, eventually things work out like cancer. I mean,
so
basically.
This is a global mutagenetic reality.
Mutagenetic?
Reality, in other words, it has effects on the human body over a period of time that can have destructive consequences, as we saw with Chernobyl. And colleagues of ours, particularly Dr. Cliff Sanderson and his wife, Galina, a Russian documentarian, went to Russia to examine the effect several years later. And just last year, we were with a videographer from Italy who went over to this same area and was horrified that the wild boars, the wild pigs in the field had high levels of radioactivity, but there was an absence of life.
Yeah, people aren't living in Chernobyl, and it took place 25 years ago.
Right.
So what's interesting is even when our friend went into film, the person who guided her was only given that job for 2 years. After 2 years, he has to come out. Now, what's really important, I think this is important for your audience especially, is that you're thinking, okay, how much radiation are these people getting? I mean, if they're in Tokyo, they're about 120, 160 miles away, depending on what location.
And here we see a picture of the other prefectures. And the radiation dosages.
Well, it looks like all of Japan is full of some sort of radiation.
Well, especially the north part, yeah.
What do you do with the demographics?
The whole country, particularly Tokyo.
Do you move 1/6 of the population, or do you have what some would call a systematic mixed calibration process of giving certain radiation counts that seem to feel appropriate for that particular time, popular consumption, not giving the complete story. And this is what we found when we were in Japan.
So what you're saying, the media is not giving the complete story. Actually, the meltdown hasn't stopped, has it?
No.
Well, parts of it has, but it's been, actually there was a recent report though, even from now testing inside the reactor, that it was extremely high levels inside that reactor, and there's still water going in.
Spewing out and into the, what is it doing in the ocean? That's just the air.
1,000 times more cesium than normal are in the oceans.
Is cesium the only
Well,
element?
actually, reactor 3, because there were 3 reactors, but reactor 3 has a fuel called MOX. And that particular reactor, that was the one people saw with the black smoke coming out of the top, actually, unfortunately, has some of the worst fuel. It has plutonium. And plutonium elements...
80 million times stronger in terms of its radioactivity.
And it has a 24,000-year half-life.
So is that coming out into the atmosphere?
Well, yeah, the black smoke. What you were saying.
Is that around the planet?
Or several times has encircled the planet.
It has. So everyone's being poisoned.
There's also hot particles, and these are encased in carbon because of some of the explosion from the reactors that had taken place.
Right.
And those things actually, if you inhale them, and they're 2 microns large, which means you can't even see it.
And accidentally are on the streets of Tokyo, inhale, you have.
Then it sits in your body and resides in your body for whatever.
And what does it do to someone's body?
Well, if you have it, if it happens to be cesium-137, it'll be there for 30 years, and it'll be radiated.
What will it do to you?
It will create a cancer situation.
So what can people do in Japan then? Is it mostly in Japan, or is it people around the world have to worry?
Well, the good news is that we were just about to, in the U.S., in California, in Europe, and in Africa. In fact, they wanted to put these little pebbles, they're called, in southern Africa to give people nuclear power stations, all these little towns. We're just about to put billions of dollars into the technology. So in a sense, this has been a wake-up call, not only for Japan, that was going to move to major nuclear installations, even more than what they had, but also all over the world. And I applaud Germany and Switzerland, who has come out and said, you know, or at least Angela Merkel and the Swiss people, that we are going to cut down on nuclear power as fast as we possibly can.
We need other forms of power, but let's get back to Japan, because you were there.
Yes.
Tell me what you experienced being in that
we saw the largest city in the world, basically.
Tokyo.
Yes. Without active traffic movement. Everybody was underground.
How much after the earthquake were you there?
We were there
a couple months, yeah.
Yeah,
but actually, of course, and that was smart. It was they should take the metro. They shouldn't be on the streets. I mean, the taxi cab drivers were very much complaining.
So there's no one on the streets of Tokyo anymore?
Well, none of the tourists. There's no one from China. There's no tourists anymore.
What about the Japanese themselves? Are they?
Well, they're taking the subways. They're staying in the buildings, and they should.
So it's like no one's outside in Tokyo.
The Morgan Stanley building, over $3 billion in cost to produce, is empty, representing one of the largest corporations in the world in Tokyo. And so even though Tokyo is some 160 miles away, you have people who are feeling the effects of high radiation levels. And of course, this shifts from situation to situation, which is why local communities have, as it were, their own underground of sharing information with the dosimeters or their Geiger counter instrumentation, because people do not trust the government.
But this is shocking. I mean, before we get to the government cover-up, it's shocking that, first of all, we're not hearing that on mainstream news, that Tokyo is like a ghost town with no one on the street. Is that really true?
Well, I mean, there's still taxis driving, but I mean, the amount of population that you should have, like in New York, you don't have. You have it like at sometime at 2 in the morning.
And the Japanese government is suppressing the knowledge about the levels of radiation?
Yeah, there's two sites. There's the major site that the Japanese government's coming out, and there's another one called Japan Geiger. And that's the one that's really doing the readings of this for the people. And people are starting to look and realize that, you know, it's much higher.
JapanGeiger.com.
Yeah, it's much, much higher than what, you know, the normal government is coming out with. I also want to add the food, because we haven't talked about the food.
Because a lot of
you have water. You have, well, kelp is a natural way of solving radiation, but if it gets polluted.
If radiated, then you don't want to have kelp.
And originally they thought that the animals were safe in some areas around, but then they realized that the wheat and the straw they were giving the animals was contaminated. So then the animals took this in.
This is like a genocide of a whole culture, a whole people that seems to be in the process right now.
Well, what the government has decided, fortunately, has been to strategically move some 20,000 people to Okinawa. But we're looking at a much larger situation that affects Korea, Taiwan, China, the islands of the Pacific, in terms
of
Hawaii,
in terms
of the ongoing
of the US.
situation, which is why we're having this conversation. The Japanese have tremendous scientific brilliance, and this political situation should not curtail the opportunity to work strategically.
But what can we do? I mean, about this? What can the Japanese do about it?
I mean, we worked a little bit with Dr. Emoto. He's looking at water coming in from Russia that had been proven to be helpful during the Chernobyl crisis. He's trying to get that in. He's also promoting a certain type of new energy technology, which we call Brown's gas, or oxyhydrogen fuel, which we support as well, which is taking water and just lightly splitting it, not making it into
with the radiation that's already there, that's polluting the country, what can they do about that? What can people do? Yes.
Well, the classical solution would be to cover these areas with a mountain of cement, like was done in Chernobyl.
It's hard to cover Tokyo with a mountain of cement.
Not Tokyo, I'm talking about the plants themselves.
Well, why don't they do that?
Well, they're trying to exercise various levels of countermeasures. And I believe the logic was, rather than scare the population and panic the population, because you have a island population that is significant, that cannot be moved. You have a situation where the infrastructure has been giving to itself mixed signals, so no one knows exactly what chain of command to follow. And you have a situation here that is not simply the radiation, but you have a triple disaster of the earthquake, $11 billion, the equivalent in American dollars. You have the tsunami that has wiped out villages, caused chaos all along the northeast coast. But you have a situation that is sociologically horrendous, and it's in perhaps so shocking that the logic of traditional politics cannot deal with this. Imagine a country that went through the first Hiroshima, Nagasaki event, finding out that the inability to elevate its plants on platforms off the ocean frontier has caused a situation that has brought to Japan an enormous.
What are the solutions?
Well, I was going to say the real danger to people and to animals really is cancer. So,
is there any remedies besides?
I was going to say the best thing that people can do, and this is what's been talked about, other than certain food things like kelp, as that we mentioned, and other things that can try to neutralize or alkaline the system so that it neutralizes some of these radiations, is really to do more of a meditation reality, because we believe that the body itself can heal itself.
We call this deep field relaxation.
So you're saying the only defense against radioactivity is to create an inner state that will counterbalance the negative effects.
And the hypertension that goes with uncertainty.
The hypertension.
The uncertainties that increase
to
the
calm
adrenaline,
the body.
increase the panic button of not knowing where to go, what to do, what to eat. Imagine suddenly the meats, the precious seafood, water, milk.
What's happening?
The whole spectrum of food is off limits. You can imagine in an industrial giant like Japan, which has the third largest economy in the world, being put into this whirlwind of situation. If I can complete my previous affirmation, avoiding local biospheric collapse.
Right.
So what can we do?
Would you say if it was feasible to evacuate the whole country? I'm not saying that.
Well, the northern part, they should definitely even our government and the Australian government requested that the Japanese government evacuate more than they have.
How many people is that? Like, must be millions.
Well, no, they only evacuated 30 kilometers around the plant.
What do you suggest?
Well, actually, the people are crying out to the government, please, if we want to go away, help us, because some people don't have the money to relocate.
How many people you suggest they relocate?
Well, they probably wouldn't get as far as I would say.
What
I think
would you suggest?
Well, probably 60 to 80, maybe 100 kilometers. That's right outside of Tokyo.
So that's how many people?
Well, actually, it's probably not a humongous amount, but I mean, it's not in the
100,000, 200,000 people.
Maybe 250,000.
Just getting like the reality check of how many people.
Well, you have to see how many people are already wiped out in the
how many people really need to move out of the most toxic areas?
I would say a couple hundred thousand.
It's a global problem. It's a global situation that needs the whole planet to come together.
Exactly. The strategic demographic suggesting moving larger numbers to Naha, the capital of Okinawa, and surrounding islands, the Ryukyu Islands to the south of Okinawa, could take in double, triple that amount.
And also the Japanese are asking for them to label the sources of the food. So if milk is coming, where'd the milk come from? If beef is there in the stores, where'd the beef? Everyone needs to know where that is.
What's the effect on our food system and on the waters and the fish that swim through the Pacific? I mean, what are the effects of that?
The effects are, to quote a dear colleague of mine, do not eat fish that are not from your own fish farm.
So you recommend fish farms now over like wild
in that
Pacific?
part of the world?
Anything from the Pacific is probably no fish from the Pacific Ocean.
There's got to be more and more tests. That's another thing that needs to be done. I mean, testing is really has not been sufficiently done.
Okay, so
in these areas.
Are you saying that the Pacific Ocean is full of radiation from the Fukushima
I would say
plant?
in the area closest to Fukushima for sure.
But there's the tides and there's the.
But they only tested something like 20-kilometer region.
I got a colleague who was flying in a jet over Tokyo. This is at 33 to 35,000 feet.
Yeah.
And his dosimeters were registering, during that short period of time, radiation levels that would be equivalent to a whole year under normal conditions. This is a scientist who was able to take readings of what we call stratospherics and was aware of the embarrassment that it would cause the political government.
Well, it's not about embarrassment, it's about protecting people.
Exactly, and this is why you need to have social scientists. You need to have planetary scientists. You need to have...
This is a planetary situation.
You need to have a different structure of command that puts all the cards on the table.
But let's also move forward with new technology, and I think that's really important,
But
Alan.
I do think that the planet needs to come together over this situation. It's not local to a country.
The problem is people aren't dropping dead right now, and so it's going to happen over the next 1, 2, 3, 10. Even our friend who was in Hiroshima actually lived to be about 50 years old, so he lived 30 or 40 years.
have
years.
lived a long time because they had miso, you know, things that were natural raised. But you said when you were in Tokyo, you
could feel it. You could feel it.
What?
Well, you can feel like your
That's what you felt?
your glands swelling up a bit. Dr. Hurtak felt it more in his skin.
You do. What did you have a mask when you were breathing through a mask?
No, but I recommend people do that. I didn't realize how dangerous.
You weren't breathing through a mask when you were in Tokyo.
But I would recommend that for anyone going right now.
I want to say this is the worst thing that could be as a message to the people of Japan is a negative message.
No,
a positive message is that Japan has the resources, just as it came out of the destruction of World War II, to rebuild itself. It is a country that has given the Western world the green card. It can give onto its people fantastic breakthroughs in scientific alternatives. The importance is the psychology of positive thinking and what we will call through our research with people involving use of music harmonics, a deep relaxation field or reflective field where a person visualizes the positive energies, rebuilding and recycling the elements.
Right. You can restore your body. Even if you have radiation, you can neutralize that by positive thoughts, by prayer and meditation, by tying into your higher beingness. And that's what we recommend. People have to start doing that.
Even at Ground Zero in Hiroshima, there were Catholic nuns that survived without any problems to the body because they were in a state of prayer. We teach the use of meditation and prayer to bring the mind into a higher altered state of consciousness through which other factors that are to the scientific community irrational or supra-rational activate the human organism to let nature flow more evenly and harmonically, provided that person is able to remove himself or herself out of the zone of radiation.
And then move to solar and wind technology.
Yeah,
just think, they're right there. They have so much wind right on the coast. They could have, and also new things like electromagnetic energy.
I know, but before we get to that, I just want to finish this point about the inner resources we have to counteract the radiation, the harmful radiation. So we need to go inward and generate a field of healing, of protection, of love, of vitality in order to counteract the negative effects of this.
And that we need to do in all ways and all the time, because even in the cities,
scientists and medical people we talked to in Russia found the most positive response was from those who learned to practice meditation.
I see.
Hyperventilate with certain sounds and certain techniques of relaxation, as opposed to pushing the panel of
fear,
despair,
and negative
thinking, survival mechanisms that are frankly not in the immediate future.
Okay, so let's go to the good technologies.
Well, yeah, it's about time they got away from nuclear. All of us should get away from nuclear, and thank goodness, in a sense, this is pushing us all, and I hope Japan is the first to move forward. So not only solar and wind, which is really moving ahead, and the costs are coming down because of the mass...
I brought with me a New York Times from July of 2009, speaking of Obama's, the long arc of a nuclear-free vision. Unfortunately, our President Obama put Dr. Chu, head of the Department of Energy, was going to bring us into a renaissance of nuclear plants.
But there's other technologies.
What about
we're moving away from that?
Well, exactly.
Energy?
There's two types of free energy, or, well, the one type that we like to work with is electromagnetic energy. And there's people like John Bedini. You can find him on the internet. He has the EMF, or electromagnetic force. And it works on the natural fields where you have the plus and minus, or the north and south pole of electromagnetic fields that continue to repel each other and get an engine going. Now, he hasn't been able to necessarily run a building, but he can charge batteries. And I think people are working on that, many other technologies. And again, as we mentioned, the hydrogen-oxygen split, where you don't have to divide to pure hydrogen, but you keep it as a monoatomic hydrogen.
But as we sort of have to wrap up, but I want to know, is any information, you wrote the Keys of Enoch in 1973, any higher
the Keys of
direction?
Enoch tell us in Key 118 that man has violated his atmosphere.
Yes.
And I think must
Through
be aware
nuclear power.
of nuclear and misuse of nuclear energy. We must be aware that we're going into a transition. We're not going to be able simply to throw away nuclear energy, but we can make a transition to other forms. We've got fantastic things going on behind the scenes, from zero-point energy to levitation technology. One of my colleagues from a a company in Houston showed the energy minister, Stephen Chu, before he became head of our Department of Energy, this levitation technology. He didn't understand how it worked, but he began to grasp the fact that there are
superconductivity.
That there are, no, not superconductivity, but levitation, dealing with the modulation of energy currents. We know that there are tremendous breakthroughs around the corner, very, very close, and that this event, we believe, will move the world scientific community collectively into mobility and finding answers.
Right, we can't go back, but let's move forward.
Right, and it also brings up for me the potential for more genius to come out of the human species. We need to create new technologies that counteract radiation, that give us free energy, fuel to power a new vision of humanity.
And this would be the answer if there are cosmic cultures that hear the cry of Mother Earth. In fact, when we were in Japan, we noted through videographers
tell me about that.
Over the Fukushima plants there were more
lights, interesting lights. In fact, you can find it on YouTube. If you search for UFOs Fukushima, you can see the lights there.
Are they helping us?
Well, you know, they're also in Atusha, which is an area in Argentina over the nuclear power plants. They were seen over military bases.
To investigate, there have been what I will call superluminal spheres of light, suggesting that this experiment of the human race has taken the wrong track, and perhaps we will need outside help, i.e. from a higher evolutionary source, in order to set the record straight.
They want to help us.
Would you get in your meditations, or do you get that they are helping us? Like these higher levels,
but they're leaving a lot of it to us. We have to make the final decision. They are guiding our hands.
What is the decision we need to make?
To move forward with better technologies that's more humanistic.
And to recognize we're cosmic citizens, completing a lesson in the classroom that hasn't worked. We do not need a technological slide towards self-destruction. We need a technology that works with consciousness rather than against consciousness. And this is future science. Future science is science guided by consciousness for a positive future. We need to make this work collectively. Japan has been the flag of a change in attitudes. All throughout the world now, we're looking at a positive approach to phasing out an old approach, coming with a new approach through tidal energy, through fusion energy, through zero-point energy. Please go to our websites. Please be aware of the work that's being done by some of the best scientific minds in the world that will find an answer to this quantum change.
Thank you, Dr. Hurtak. Thank you, Desiree.
Thank you.
I've been talking here, and go to their website, futurescience.org. And is that the main website?
Yes, that's good.
Thank you. This is Alan Steinfeld. And if you have any questions about anything you've heard here, email me at newrealities@earthlink.net, and I'll pass whatever I can on to the Hurtaks. Thank you again for being such pioneering reporters on